Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good evening. It's been quite a day. Thank you for being here and joining in with our practice, which we dedicate to this talk today about practice that is fueled by kind of an urgency about the immediacy of life and death. It's brought on by the death this morning of Jim Govea, a dear friend and member of our Sangha. So I'd like to dedicate this talk to him today. Going beyond grief for the world. Can everybody hear me? Going beyond grief for the world, dwelling in the unconditioned, the uninclined, the subtle, the deathless, the unafflicted. This is what the Buddha exhorted us to do, while we still have the energy and the will to realize the root, the source of our mind and heart, and awareness in our meditation. Once we have realization of Buddha mind, it's always available thereafter. By simply turning the mind in that direction, because it is our natural mind, which many of us have forgotten to notice. And it's always available everywhere at once. But before realizing Buddha mind, it may take us a sustained and determined effort in our practice. And then after realizing Buddha nature, it's essential to continue to practice in order to refine and clarify and refresh. Because life is only ever happening now. And we practice enlightenment by awakening freshly in each moment. We are not here to gain something that is not inherent, that is not our birthright as human beings with consciousness, but to remember and to notice and to realize this mind, this natural mind. We shouldn't neglect our practice. We've needed the energy. We need energy for Buddha realization, for the undetermined duration of our life. We never know how long we have. Sometimes we have notice. Jim knew that his condition was grave and was able to prepare, which helped him die peacefully. But we never know. It can come unexpectedly. I think of the people who've died in the fires. They didn't know waking up that morning what was coming. The Buddha taught us to contemplate the flesh body and to come to know the nature of our flesh body, which is impermanent and also coextensive with all things. This means that the nature of the body is to live for a while and change, and eventually to pass away, to die to this life, to die to this particular form. Yet, what this body is composed of continues in new forms. We say that death is the great unbinding of the elements, which came together briefly in you or me in the form of a unique and wonderful human being. Each of us. We live and we breathe. But at a certain point, the elements disassemble. This is the recycling nature of all matter, of all form. And it goes on forever and permeates the living world. the living world and also the inanimate world, the world of rock and ice, although in a different time dimension, time frame than biologic life. With the virus and the fires and the ever more disrupted social spaces, we don't know what will be coming along, perhaps quite suddenly, to end our life in our present form and throw us into the great recycling bin, mixed recycling. And no matter how we've lived, the physical body will come to an end. What we have set in motion through our actions and our words will affect what goes beyond us. Even the Buddha, with his great store of accumulated virtue, could not avoid physical death and relinquishing the body, letting go of the heavy burden of flesh. And yet, 2,600 years ago, we're still looking to his life for guidance and inspiration. So any of us may also live on in the ways that we have affected others in the world. And this prompts us to live with great awareness and care. While our energy is robust, the body is a source of pleasure and also displeasure and pain and fulfillment and satisfaction and dissatisfaction. But as death approaches, we begin to realize the burden of the material of our flesh and the pain that comes with identifying with it. But we naturally identify with our body. So when it comes to practice and what this is all about, we can ask, who is it? What is it that can realize Buddha nature? Who realizes? Who is the realizer? Who is it that takes refuge and leaps beyond form and the formless in deep samadhi? And this is what I'd like to look into a little bit more in this talk. I heard my teacher, Chozen, say on a number of occasions, once you die on the cushion, you never have to die again, which really emphasizes the importance of practice, taking it seriously, and really attending every time we sit down to the possibility of understanding thoroughly who we are, the nature of this life, the nature of the who. So what does it mean we never have to die again? And immediately I turn to samadhi. So what are we doing when we're sitting wholeheartedly in zazen? Wholeheartedly, nothing held back, not following all of the discursive thought and the distractions of sensation and mosquitoes. The water of deep samadhi. In these waters, all things become fresh. We are everywhere in our experience at once. The center, there is no center. There's no outside and inside. There's no concern for these concepts. So what is samadhi? What is deep samadhi? And when I ask that, what I'm doing is asking, do you know the meaning for yourself in your own direct experience? Do you know samadhi? And if that's not something that immediately you say, oh yeah, I know just what you're talking about, then I really want to encourage you and hopefully inspire you to know this vast field of release and refuge for yourself. We use these words, but do we know their meaning for ourselves? And I think about standing by the river in Corvallis and watching the Willamette course by. And this is, as you all know, if you've seen it, you can really see it moving. And when it's really full, it really moves fast. Or you may also know the experience of letting yourself be borne along on the flow of the river, if you've ever just jumped in and floated along. And imagine trying to reverse that flow. Or imagine the feeling of standing firm as the river muscles against you in its coursing downstream. The moment that you attempt to stand firm and not move with it, you introduce stress, tension into the experience. Because the river's flow cannot be altered, because flow is its nature. And this is it's a metaphor for samadhi, for the same kind of release into the natural course of things. It is the nature of deep and still sitting, where we know for ourselves and everywhere at once the flowing nature of non-separation, of no self trying to gain a firm, stable foothold in a great muscling river of flow. So as I was thinking about this, I remembered that poem, and probably some of you know it, by Ryokan. Like the little stream making its way through the mossy crevices, I too quietly turn clear and transparent. It's such a lovely way of expressing how we practice, by opening to the watery flow of the present moment, whatever it brings along in the body of the flow, and not standing against the stream, not efforting to direct the stream, but relaxing and trusting the flow. And the flow of what? The flow of what? The flow of nothing. Is anything flowing in a state of deep samadhi? I challenge you to investigate that. Is anything flowing? When we let go of all externals and all agendas and all judgments and everything that you consider the self, the noun of the self, the object, the form of the self, and we turn our complete attention in Zazen to breath to begin with. Because eventually Zazen does not need any method. We're already here, we're already complete, we're already aware, but for a while we need method. And so we turn our entire attention to breath. The breath is no small matter, as we're all experiencing right now. And there is a last breath. I was very moved on the site where people have been sharing about Jim. Gloria wrote this short poem. The very last breath we offer it as nectar. Merge with awareness. The very last breath we offer as nectar. Merge with awareness. This is the realm of the sacred. The sacred meaning everything altogether present right here. Being in full realization and full experience of that. We take care of our breath. And we also tend to take it for granted, except maybe at a time like this. I remember rolling my eyes when my father would express his extreme pleasure at walking and breathing, because he was a really elemental person. I just roll my eyes like, oh, Dad. And yet, I also know this appreciation for myself from a very early age because of the asthma that I've had since I was 2. And I've spent many years, as some of you may have also, if you have asthma, or are suffering with pneumonia, struggling for breath. And it's breath that is the fundamental ingredient in Zen practice. It's so simple and yet vast. Really learning how to pay attention to breath. It's not an easy practice. And I picture quite a while ago, I was at a retreat with Shodo Harada Roshi, and he demonstrated the breath. He was talking about the breath as flowing through the body, which was an empty tube. And after he went through all the words of description, he demonstrated it. He demonstrated the out-breath. And he went on and on and on and on. So this is a beginning. Placing awareness on the outflow, and then the turning, and then the inflow. Naturally, not forcing it. How long do you naturally exhale until the body immediately begins to turn into the inhale? So you don't do it with your will, you let the body lead. The inflow with appreciation and gratitude. And I add that in the description of the breath in Zazen because it's really the quality of the heart that we bring to Zazen, that we bring to our determination. The feeling of appreciation for this fundamental access to flow that enlivens us and keeps us alive as long as we're alive. And the gratitude, freely offered. And it helps us settle the entire system into the present moment. As soon as we sit down in Zazen, we begin. We turn the attention to the breath. And this turning simplifies awareness, simplifies the field of awareness. We sustain this simplicity in practice until we, like the little stream making its way through the mossy crevices, quietly turn clear and transparent, where we are everywhere in experience at once. This description is quite true to the nature of deep samadhi. And it's amazing how we can resist this wonderful release from grief for the world, how attached we can be to our grief and are struggling. And especially now with all the media and the great showman of the president that we have in the spotlight of the world, it's hard to pull ourselves away sometimes because it's also threatening. And our animal nature gets hooked. When we feel threatened and fearful, we keep our eyes on the threat. This is as it should be. And yet we also know that there is no solution in samsara. We cannot compete with samsara, and we cannot compete with life and death. We turn to Buddha Dharma, we turn to Zazen, to our practice, to refresh and dip deeply into the larger source of life. This is our Bodhisattva vow. And unless we can refresh in the pure waters of love and clear awareness and connection, we can't really be of help in the 6 realms of existence. The more refreshed we are, the clearer we are, the more accurately we can respond to very difficult situations and very complicated situations. The world is very complicated. Our practice is very simple. How do we bring the simplicity and the spaciousness of the mind of practice into this incredibly complicated present moment? The habit of suffering and stress can be so ingrained that we individually and together forget the depth and grace of our existential animal being. We forget. Samsara is a world of deep forgetting. But in the intimate waters of presence, all things become fresh everywhere at once. So in this talk, I'm hoping to inspire you to practice meditation even more fully, to remember the importance of this practice. Because it is this quality of mind and heart that the world needs desperately to awaken to. And we have our doorway into it. There are other doorways, all of which partake of stillness and listening. Because we're in deep doo-doo. And in addition to any kind of active engagement in the community that you're drawn to, which is really valuable, and let us all, as we do that, be loving and generous and joyful. But we also, at the same time, need to deeply settle our hearts. And though this is not visible in the usual ways, we are engaging with great faith and great determination to awaken ourselves and all beings every time we sit down in meditation. It is the great way. And in our practice, we dip into the great way. We remember the great way everywhere at once. Dogen said it this way: in serenity, everything permeates each other and becomes a dignified mandala of the whole world. And I love the fact that he uses the word dignified and mandala. The mandala is a pattern that represents the entirety of the universe. How do we gain and be supported by the dignity of being humans who are really awake and aware? So I'd like to finish by reading a poem. Some of you may be quite familiar with it. It's called A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. And following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. Do you know that poem? That's Stafford, William Stafford. A ritual to read to each other. Poetry is for some, there's Zazen. For some, it can be the route to complete awakening, to the nature of this life. So I offer this talk in gratitude to all of you for your practice and practicing with me, because it helps me continue. Even though I know the supreme value, we totally need Sangha to help us all remember our deepest and most complete life. Thank you.